specifics. We have no backup for what we're saying, and you largely ignore the affidavits that are filed. Whether you agree or disagree with an affidavit, it's evidence.
Normally you would expect to see a smooth curve going up, not any big spikes. That's kind of what Greg was talking about, the anomalies of loading and uploading those votes. So that big spike that occurs there is a prime indicator of fraudulent voting.
And that's 604,000 votes in 90 minutes, is that right?
Correct. This is 337 votes, 337,000 votes in that
period of time.
Yes.
And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures are about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represent over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
How about that? We're not going to let them go to court and do that. We're going to let this election go by when there are, in this case, 60 witnesses that can prove what I'm saying to you and other acts of fraud in Michigan. I mean, what's happened to this country if we're going to let that happen? What happened to this country if we're going to cover that up?
It was a serious press conference that went on for about 90 minutes. The media, wow, once again, they showed their true colors. They have neither the resources, the time, the inclination. They don't have anything. What they do have is attitude and sarcasm, and that's what they put on display today. I want to show you a tweet from Jonathan Karl. This is the the president of the White House Correspondents Association. You don't get more establishment journalists than this. This is what he said. Unfortunately, as Rudy begins to sweat, his hair coloring is streaking down the sides of his face. Some of the most interesting, shocking, troubling allegations, detailed. He's explaining what he can make public and what he can't. It would generate curiosity, shouldn't it, among a healthy press corps? Not this one. They just wrote it off because they're too invested in Donald Trump losing.
Well, that was certainly a colorful news conference from Rudy Giuliani, but it was light on facts. So much of what he said was simply not true. He opened by making this really bold and baseless claim that a lot of this alleged nationwide voter fraud that he's referring to all came from one centralized place.
It's bold and baseless because someone didn't go to her and knock on her door and show her, hey, here's the evidence. Whatever happened to pursuing leads? This is big, and for all of them to just dismiss it. This reporter, I think she was in nursery school back when Rudy Giuliani was breaking up the mob here in New York City, when he was busting insider trading rackets on Wall Street. And she's not impressed by the colorful news conference. I am not impressed.
The facts matter, the truth matters, and if you are fair reporters, you will cover that fairly and appropriately, and you will allow coverage of our media team here and our legal team. That is absolutely shocking that all you cover are around the margins, and I've seen all of you taking pictures right now, and I can anticipate what your headlines are going to be. If you are not willing to talk about the evidence that has been presented, then that is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, Jenna, you must start giving me lottery numbers now, because you were right. I want to show the audience some of the headlines that popped out today. You were spot on. They didn't really do this, but it was funny. Not only those were the ones that were there and covered it.
Really can't miss it. The yellow button at the back of the Sequoia voting machine. Tens of thousands of machines used in 16 states and Washington, D.C. That button puts the machine in manual mode, so anyone can vote and repeatedly cast as many votes as they want.
Rudy Giuliani on Fox Sunday spinning his latest false conspiracy theory about an American voting machine company, a bizarre take involving George Soros, votes being counted in Spain, and dead strongman Hugo Chavez.
A company that has close ties with Venezuela and therefore China?
False. Truth, facts, they don't seem to matter to Giuliani.
Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela. Watchdog groups question why U.S. voting machines would be under the control of citizens of another country, especially a country whose own election process is highly suspect.
We believe this is a national security issue.
And uses Venezuelan company software that's been used to steal elections in other countries. I mean, I don't think people have any idea of the dimension of the national security problem that Dominion creates.
There is no way that companies belonging to non-U.S. corporations should have access to our elections.
The goal here is to go around the Iron Curtain of censorship that, what publication are you with? It's to go around the outrageous Iron Curtain of censorship and get facts to the American people that if you were a fair and honest network, you'd have been reporting for the last 2 weeks.
It has been a bad week for the Trump legal team that actually right now is holding a press conference that is so bananas we can't even bring it to you because it's just so full of BS. The Trump legal team mission is a mission impossible. And that's even before you consider the collective lawyering abilities of this crack team that Trump has assembled: Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, Joseph DeGenova, Victoria Tonsing, and Sidney Powell.
They're censoring us, and they don't want their viewers to actually hear directly from us insights or research into this, but it's pure censorship. And for every person out there, if there's a network that is refusing to bring you something on the air because they want to declare it bananas, that should tell you everything you need to know about the fact-checking and actual journalism of that network. That's disgusting.
Why do you think this is so special? Why do you guys have it so special?
Well, for me, it's really special because now we have the first Black Asian female president in office, elected, and Joe Biden was able to steal now. He was able to win. Sorry.
I don't understand here.
No, he was able to win the election. Yes.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Is that just Joe being Joe? I mean, just another of his many gaffes, or is that a Freudian slip of some kind?
Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win.
You sent out in the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania 148 absentee or mail-in ballots. You received back 1.4 million approximately. However, in the count for president, you counted 2.5 million. I don't know what accounts for that 700,000 difference between the number of ballots you sent out and the number of ballots that ended up in the count. That number, 2,589,242, was on your government website until yesterday. And yesterday it was removed without explanation. I'm going to be very interested in hearing what the explanation is. And I can't imagine you could possibly certify without knowing the explanation of that, as well as the explanation to the 22,686 mail-in ballots that were returned on the day they were mailed. That's a trick. How about they were returned? How about 32,591 were returned the day after they were mailed? Another 20,000 were returned before they were mailed. I don't know what you need to wake you up, to do your job, and inform the American people, whether you like it or not, of the things they need to know. This is real. It is not made up. It is not, there's nobody here that engages in fantasies. I've tried 100 cases. I prosecuted some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. I know crimes. I can smell them. You don't have to smell this one. I can prove it to you 18 different ways.
I don't even know how this happened in America. We could send 50 years ago, men to the moon, but we can't have a safe, secure election in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. What's going on here? It's got to be by design because we have the technology, we have stealth aircraft that are the envy of the world, but we can't run an election better than Afghanistan. Congressman Perry, you and I are in Afghanistan, and I don't know how in the heck Afghanistan has more secure, safe elections than Pennsylvania does. I mean, beam me up, Scotty. There's no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Really? We move heaven and earth with American dollars to secure elections in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. We can't do it in our own state. It's by design. There's people in Pennsylvania not interested in safe, secure elections, and we have to correct this. There's two things that need to happen. First off, we need to make sure the real winner is sent forth from this presidential election. And number two, we need to fix this. This doesn't happen ever again. I can't believe we're having this conversation here in Pennsylvania. This is the kind of stuff I hear about that goes on in Belarus under Lukashenko, or in Russia under Putin, under Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Really? Here in our state? I mean, this is disgusting to me. I watched when I was doing strategy in Russia, Putin's people stuffing ballot boxes. The same thing that happened in Pennsylvania. When I saw that 15, 20 years ago, I was like, well, thank God we're not like that. What happened? What happened? And we're not going to let it stand. I saw, you have to forgive people because we are a constitutional republic, so I'll forgive those that say democracy, but I saw one man had a sign in Philadelphia, and the irony wasn't lost on me. Democracy dies in Philadelphia. Can you imagine the irony of that? Where the light of liberty was lit in 1776, it transformed this world where, in this very same state, a new birth of freedom. Democracy can die in darkness, in dark rooms with no transparency and accountability. We're shining light on this darkness here. We're going to take our state back. We're not standing aside in this hour. As Representative Metcalf rightly said, in 1994, there was so much shenanigans and cheating in the Marks versus Stinson case that a federal district judge threw out the election results, took a senator out of Harrisburg, state senator, and put the Republican in because the election results were so corrupted. So we do have a precedent here, federal courts, and I hope you take a hard look at that here. Has our election results in Pennsylvania at the presidential and other levels been so corrupted that the results have to be thrown out? That's going to be a case you're going to have to make before the Supreme Court there, but it sure sounds like something stinks in Denmark or in Philadelphia. This is our day, this is our hour, this is our time. So yes, Mr. Franklin, a republic, if you can keep it, we're going to keep it. Can you keep it? Can you? Will you? We're going to keep the republic. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Trump en el año 2016 apenas arañó el 36% en el estado de Nueva York. Ahora llegó al 44%. ¿Vos me querés explicar que creció en Nueva York y bajó en Pensilvania?
No. Hay cosas que
¿Entendés lo que te quiero decir? O sea, creció en Nueva York, creció en California, creció en Colorado, estado ultrademócrata, creció en el estado de Illinois, y bajó en Michigan, bajó en Wisconsin, que son estados que están pegados y que han sufrido la desgracia de los lockdowns demócratas, del Black Lives Matter y toda la milonga esta. ¿Cómo le fue a Trump en la Florida en 2020 en relación al 2016? Mucho mejor.
Yo creo
mucho mejor. En 2016 Miami lo gana por un puntito y moneda. Ahora ganó por 4 puntos. Si Trump de verdad perdiera la elección, sería la primera vez en el cual un candidato republicano o demócrata recupera bancas en el Congreso de los Estados Unidos de 27 toss-ups. ¿Sabés cuántas carreras ganó el Partido Republicano?
No sé.
En el Congreso, 27. 27 en el House ganó. 27. Sería la primera vez que pasa, que recupera y que disputa, y que de estados, digamos, que están entre la disputa, los gana y pierde el presidente. Sería la primera vez. En los estados en donde Trump está perdiendo, de los famosos key states o de los swing states, llámalo como vos quieras, sacando los condados en donde de repente aparecen de a 40, 50, 60.000 votos, todos para Biden en bolsas, sacando esos condados, en todos estos otros condados, Biden le fue peor ahora en el 2020 que lo que le fue a Hillary en el 2016.
Ahora, yo te quiero hacer una pregunta.
People were surprised about a lot of Hispanic folks who voted for Trump. But there's a lot of evangelical Hispanics who, you know, the fact that Trump says racist things about Mexicans or puts detainees, undocumented workers in cages, they think that's less important than the fact that, you know, he supports their views on, you know, gay marriage or abortion.
President Trump received 73 million votes in this election. That's 10 million more than he received in 2016. It blows out Barack Obama's vote record. That's more legal votes than any president in history, except, of course, for Joe Biden, who barely left his basement and somehow surpassed Obama's record by a turnout of a staggering 9 million votes. How did he do that?
That these were stuffed ballots. They were falsified ballots input into the system to be counted. I mean, so mathematically, it says that this is a fraud, period. The algorithm they put in place and distributed around to all the systems in place wasn't strong enough a conversion to overcome the landslide voting for President Trump. So in the end, they had to revert back to the old way of doing it, is stuffing the ballot box with fake votes. So in order to do that, they'd had to shut down the voting, get all the Republicans out so nobody could witness it, and then come back in and bring all these votes in, false votes, and then fill them out. And they had some video of people filling them out, doing that in these voting stations. So there's some evidence for that, and also the fact that these bulk amounts of data ballots came in and just mathematically changed so drastically the results was clearly mathematically an indication that this was a total fraud. And so, because this is fundamentally fraud on a scale that we've never seen before across the entire country simultaneously. I mean, how can you coordinate the actions of like 6 different states to simultaneously stop counting? Then all of a sudden, all those same 6 states get all these extra new votes coming in late at night with nobody else around to validate the counting, then have the counting come out and say it's so skewed toward this one candidate. I mean, this is obviously a fraud on the scale that we've never experienced before. And so, you know, I just think that needs to be dealt with legally. These people need to be held accountable. If we don't do that, then it's only going to get worse. If we allow people to get away with these crimes, I mean, what they're basically saying is nobody's vote counts, right? They're basically, I think it's Stalin who said, doesn't matter who votes or how they vote, it only matters who counts the vote. And when you're counting the votes and you're only one party and you keep the other party out, you're stacking the deck.
Philadelphia City Commissioner of Elections Al Schmidt just made when he said about these recent elections in Philadelphia that these were the most secure and transparent elections in Philadelphia's history, end quote. Now, I wasn't around for every election in Philadelphia's history, but I can tell you as an eyewitness, for 10 days, for more than 80 hours, what I saw was not a secure and transparent election. The issues, irregularities, and illegitimacy of what I saw leads me to conclude that the laws of the Commonwealth and of the United States were not being followed in Philadelphia when hundreds of thousands of ballots were counted in this year's general election. Action must be taken now to maintain our free and fair elections and to preserve and protect our elections' integrity.
The key fraud is the mail-in ballot. That was the backup in case they fell too far behind. That's why they cut off the vote at midnight, 1 o'clock, when President Trump was getting too far ahead. So they cut off the vote. He was getting up to 800,000 in Pennsylvania, 300,000 in Michigan. He was even further ahead in Wisconsin. They cut off the vote. They turned things off. They chased everybody out. And then it's not your concern, except for the fact that you got to look at this somewhat in total. They started bringing in false ballots. We have 3 witnesses to 100,000 of those ballots being brought in at 4:30 in the morning in Detroit with no Republicans around that they knew of. Luckily, we had 2 that stayed behind and a Dominion employee who was willing to be honest. Not all of them are honest. And I'm going to ask you to fight. And I'm going to ask you to try to implore the other members of your legislature to stand up to this. Do not be bullied. Do not be frightened. Your political career is worth losing if you can save the right to vote in America. Because at times in our history, certain men and women have stepped forward and lost their political career to give us the rights that we have. People being actually fired from their jobs. We had a lawyer who was handling one of our major cases. His very distinguished law firm, can't be really much of a law firm, said that he couldn't remain with his law firm if he represented the President of the United States. If that isn't censorship, if that isn't a form of despotism and distortion of the values of our country, I don't know what is. It started before. It's been going on for some time, like that kind of despotism and authoritarianism. It always starts slowly. I think the pandemic released the tendencies of left-wing, socialist-leaning, socialist governors, congressmen, senators, to move to where socialism always moves to. In the history of socialism, which is an old idea, not a new idea, authoritarianism is always the end result. Because when the government controls property, the government controls. And it doesn't want to be interrupted by stupid ideas of the dumb people of the country. The elite know better. Boy, doesn't that sound like America today? I mean, that was Russia, that was China, that is China. That was Poland, that was Bulgaria, that was East Berlin. Gosh, I thought we fought that and got rid of it. Never thought I'd see it in America.
What we know is that Donald Trump won an overwhelming landslide of the people who actually showed up and voted in person, whether that was on Election Day or during early voting. And then the farther the voter got away from the authentication process, the later the votes were counted, the better Joe Biden did with those voters. And so I think there's a lesson here for Republicans to learn. If we allow the voting process to be separated from identification, authentication, audit, and review, then we're asking for these types of outcomes, because when it comes to the people who actually have to show up in person and vote, this was a landslide for Donald Trump. And everybody knows it. No one seriously even questions that.
For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country.